Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Kalevala, the national epic poem of Finland and Karelia in Russia. I'll summarize the main story, talk about its author and its influence on Finnish national and cultural identity and around the world. It was published in 1849 by Elias Lönnrot. The oral version of these poems had existed for hundreds if not thousands of years before they compiled them into one book, which he titled Kalevala. Lönnrot spent years often traveling to the very far distant areas away from the Swedish influence, untouched by modernization in harsh weather conditions, collecting and gathering poems from all over Finland and the Finnish-speaking parts of northwestern Russia called Karelia. Today it's considered the most important work of Finnish literature and has had a massive impact on the formation of the national identity in Finland. 28th of February in Finland is a national holiday called Kalevala Day, but more formally known as Culture Day. Kalevala is also the most translated Finnish work of literature into 55 languages. First, who was Elias Lönnrot and why did he write it? Elias Lönnrot has a towering figure in reviving the Finnish language. He compiled over 200,000 words into a Swedish-Finnish dictionary. Swedish was the dominant language among the elites in Finland. He was a doctor by profession. While working as a physician in the most difficult circumstances, he spent a lot of time in collecting folk tales. He traveled to the remotest villages to find peasants, minstrels, and musicians who could recite the poems. He mainly focused on the eastern part of Finland and the Finnish-speaking Karelia, as they had preserved most of the poems. The western or the elite class of Finns, due to the influence of the Swedish language, had lost most of the Kalevala poems. After almost 20 years of gathering poems, tales, legends and myths, he published Kalevala in 1849. In fact, Lönnrot used his own language to rewrite some of the poems and combine the tales and legends and composited characters to make a coherent narrative, which makes it easier for modern readers. So we haven't just a collector of the tales, but the author of the book. One example is the character of Lemminkainen, who is based off two heroic figures in Finnish mythology, Ahti, the god of sea, and Kokomail. Incidentally, Lönnrot's father was a tailor, which is interesting as he ended up stitching together a national epic for Finland. Some argue that Lönnrot reduced many of the complexities of the myths and tales in an attempt to make it more coherent as a book. He was a scientist, so his method was to write a very structured book with one main protagonist, Vainamoinen, who stays put throughout the piece. So Kalevala, fragmented in nature, was given a cohesive structure here with a clear beginning, middle and end. Today he is celebrated as the father of Finnish literature and has made an international impact too. The Argentine author Jorge Luis Borges used the name Lönnrot for the diligent detective in his story Death and the Compass in honor of the Finnish author. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbits were heavily influenced by this book, but he was very much against calling it a national epic as it would lose its artistic value. Okay, now I'll summarize the book. The book contains almost 23,000 verses and 50 stories. It centers on the conflict between Kalevala, the land of the heroes, and Pohjola, the land of the base or enemies, that refers to the people of the north. Some scholars have suggested that the conflict was between the Finnish tribes of the south and the Sami tribes of the north. There's also a theory that this conflict may have had a much older origin back in the Asiatic birthplace of the Finns, in the steppes of Central Asia or in the Ural Mountains, between two forces of light and dark. This is somewhat similar to the epic tales of the Oghuz Turks of Dede Korkut, which I discussed in a previous video, and how their myths changed as the Turkic tribes moved southward or westward and the tales were superimposed on new territories and antagonists. Incidentally, Finnish and Turkish languages are of the same Ural-Altaic family. In fact, the Finnish sky god Ukko is somewhat similar to the word Aka or Aka in Turkish, as well as Mongolian, and Og in Hungarian, meaning elder, like a father figure, which has become sky god. Kalevala starts with the myth of creation. Then we meet the first of three and the main heroes of the book, Vainamoinen, who has a magical singing voice and plays a string instrument called kantele. He is challenged by the jealous Youkahainen, like in a rap battle which Youkahainen loses. To save himself, he offers his sister Aino to Vainamoinen, but Aino is repulsed by the idea of marrying an old man. God he might be, but he is first and foremost an old man, so she drowns herself. Her tragic suicide has a profound effect on the hero. Vainamoinen heads north to the enemy country Pohjola to find a wife. He fails to convince the Maiden of the North, and while on rough seas he almost drowns. Quite ironic, as his mother was the god of water. Anyway, Louhi, the wicked queen of the North, rescues him, and Wainamoinen in return promises to create Sampo, the good luck charm, which is similar to the ring in the Lord of the Ring. Since it's not described, we don't know what it looks like. Some say Sampo is like the pillar that keeps the sky up like a roof over earth. Wainamoinen forces the blacksmith Ilmarinen, our second hero of Kalevala, to forge the Sampo, which he does, and he takes it to the north, but he fails to find a bride. Then we meet our third hero, Lemminkainen, who loves two things, women and good fight. You know where he's heading, to the north to find a wife. In Pohjola, things aren't easy. To win a bride, he's given hard challenges, during which he is killed. But later, he's revived by his mother, who had told him not to go to the north. This is very similar to a tale in the book of Dede Korkut. A boy is killed and the mother revives him. He's like a naughty boy who doesn't listen to his mother and always gets into trouble. Now, our main hero, Wainamoinen, makes another trip to the north. Again, he's almost killed. Hearing his misfortune, our engineer practical hero, Ilmarinen, also heads to the north in search of wife. The Maiden of the North chooses the blacksmith Ilmarinen over the singer Wainamoinen. A good choice, I would say, as he's a working man, a blacksmith. Now, at the wedding, our hero, Lemminkainen, the ladies' man, is not invited. You know why? Because he loves a fight. You know what happens next? He heads to the north to take revenge, but he fails, of course, and we return to his mother to be consoled. Meanwhile, my favorite of the three heroes, our blacksmith, practical man Ilmarinen, is happily married. Well, not exactly. He beats his wife a few times. His marriage doesn't last very long. His wife is killed by a slave in a stupid row. But being a practical man, he decides to build a wife for himself in a similar fashion to the Italian man Pinocchio's father trying to build a son. Sometimes it's hard to find a woman, so why not make one out of metal that lasts forever? He uses gold and silver and makes the most beautiful wife anyone has ever seen in Finland. No, I mean Kalevala. After spending days and using all his precious metals to build his bride, only then he realizes that she is freezing cold. In Finland, that's not really practical, especially in winter. You need a warm body, not a wife made of gold. He throws away the golden bride and cries for a while, but not for long. He's a resourceful man. Well, not really. He heads to north, as you would expect, and kidnaps a young princess who insults him. Our usual practical hero unexpectedly gets angry and turns her into a seagull and returns to Kalevala empty-handed. By now, you might wonder why not find a wife in Kalevala or the south. Well, the north has the most terrible people but also the most beautiful women, and they are the enemy. What better way to humiliate them to steal their women? Also, perhaps in human history, it's the allure of the other, the exotic that have fascinated humans and does even today. Another reason might be biological, to spread the genes in the most diverse way possible. Also, the women of the north are inaccessible and they don't want the southerners, so that makes them even more enticing for our heroes. Who knows? Or the simple answer might be that it makes a better story to marry a foreigner than a neighbor. Ilmarinen, on his return from the north, tells Wainamoinen about how wealthy the north has become. Why? Well, it is all because of the Sampo that he had forged, the good luck charm. To reclaim the Sampo, all three heroes of Kalevala, Wainamoinen, the singer or god of water, Lemminkainen, the fighter or the hunter god, and Ilmarinen, the engineer or the metal god, head north together, all united. What could go wrong? Wainamoinen does most of the work through his singing that makes the northerners fall asleep, and they grab the Sampo, but on the way south, they are ambushed and they lose it on the sea and it gets destroyed. Now, without the Sampo, poverty strikes the north and they in turn curse the south with diseases and all sorts of problems. Wainamoinen, a very old man by now, does his best to fight back, but his days seems numbered. Sometimes later, a virgin woman gives birth to a boy, perhaps alluding to the birth of Jesus and the Virgin Mary. Wainamoinen knows the baby is a danger to his authorities, so wants to get the boy killed. But he changes his mind once he hears the boy talk and decides his days are over, and with his tail between his legs, he vanishes, only leaving his songs and music behind, perhaps paving the way for the arrival of Christians and the end of shamanism. Now, let me tell you about the writing and the style of poetry in Kalevala. One of the most used technique is, of course, alliteration. For those who don't know what alliteration is, it is the repeated sounds. For example, in French fries, the sound of F and R are repeated in both words. This is somehow pleasant to the ears and memorable. In Kalevala, verses have 8 syllables. Martin Crawford, the English translator of the book, describes it as quick and nimble, like a dancer with light and fleeting feet. I agree. Verses change based on the mood, rhythm of the time, and rhythm of the sound. There is a circularity in the stories and verses. For example, a mother's love for the child is followed by the love of the child for the mother, to give it a feeling of dialogue rather than a long monologue. A lot of things bounce off each other and feel very engaging. Just as an example, I'll read a few verses now. This is when our engineer forger, Mr. Ilmarinen, makes a bride out of metal only to realize it's freezing cold, which is really funny and my favorite part. I shall never wed an image born from many magic metals, never wed a single maiden, never wed a golden virgin. Then the hero of the waters called together all his people, spoke these words of ancient wisdom: every child of Northland listen, whether poor or fortune favored, never bow before an image born of molten gold and silver, never while the sunlight brightens, never while the moonlight glimmers. Choose a maiden of the metals, choose a bride from gold created. Called the lips of golden maiden, silver breathes the breath of sorrow. As you can see, there's a lot of alliterations in this poem. As I was reading, I would sway from side to side. They automatically nudge you to move your body. It has music in it. Short verses and repeated words make it really musical and fast moving. But most crucially, repetition makes it easy to memorize. As I discussed in my video in the Persian epic of Shahnameh, it's the repetition that allows people to enjoy it even more, not less. Traditionally, these poems were sang by two singers while a third person was playing the instrument kantele. The poems are extremely lyrical, beautifully rendered, often very sad. I've never been to Finland. While reading it, I felt transported there, sitting by a lake or wandering in the open expanse of nature. The verses are also very conversational, like a tree swaying right and left, or someone playing tennis. Or you watch construction workers pass things from one to another and back again. There have been 5 translations of it in English. I read the translation by John Martin Crawford in 1888. It is slightly archaic, like for example, he uses the word spake instead of spoke. But overall, the translation is pretty good. I think it has captured the spirit of the original. And it's freely available on Gutenberg website. The stereotype of Finland is that the people are very close to nature. You can see that in this book. Nature is at the heart of the poem, with so many references to trees, forests, lakes, oceans, land, stone, the moon, rain, and snow. There's always a continuity and progression with everything. Nothing is dead for a long time, as they rise, grow, dominate, and conquer, and then perish. Like from a seed to a tree. One thing that fascinated me was how practical the people are in Kalevala. Of course, the character of Ilmarinen personifies that pragmatism. It also contains the basic philosophy that in order to alleviate an affliction, one has to find the root cause or the origin of it. Only then one can tackle to solve it. So in that sense, it's very practical and rational way of seeing the world, or perhaps Lönnrot imposed his own scientific views on the poem. Another thing that Lönnrot emphasized in the poem is the idea of independence or self-rule as fundamental for Finns and their gods, and more specifically Jumala, the thunder god or god of sky. It was written when Finland was part of the Tsarist Russia, so Lönnrot and many of his contemporaries were dreaming of an independent Finland one day, which happened some 70 years later after the publication of Kalevala. Ukko, or the sky god, is responsible for all kinds of weather and whatever that falls from the sky. In this epic, he is called the Thunderer. Lightning is his sword, rainbow is bow. Ukko is like the German god of Thor. The Finnish mythology is the sky center, perhaps because in the landscape of the north the sky is very prominent. Ukko encourages independence, often refusing to help, like a parent who wants to teach their kids independence by not helping them sometimes. Despite magic being prominent in the poem, it is extremely human-centered narrative. Gods are given human qualities. I think this might have been deliberate on Lönnrot's part, as he wanted to create a national epic, not a religious epic, so he had to make it human-centered. As you can see, romance is at the heart of this epic. In every story, men go in search of wife. Women in turn tend to be very selective with their husband. To win the heart of a woman, men have to accomplish something. Often challenges were set for them to overcome. So you couldn't just marry someone, you had to show that you were up to it. I wonder how the modern Finns find their partners. Actually, there's a sport in Finland where men compete in wife-carrying contests. To marry a Finnish, you have to be physically very strong. Women are independent, often working alongside men. In fact, Finland was the first European country to give women full political rights in 1906. Aino's tragic tale is sad and quite heartbreaking, but it only shows that she didn't want to marry an old man and chose death instead. Lempo, the Finnish god of love, is depicted as evil demon because passion and frenzy bordering insanity. Nowadays, both Hissi, the devil, devil, and lempo, love, are used as swear words in Finland, which some suggest is because of the Christian view of romance and sex. They have taken negative connotations. Perhaps Lönnrot was trying to make the tales kosher for the Finnish Orthodox Church, who opposed nationalism and national identity that might question their authority as a Christian. Since these poems were fragments or separate tales created by generations of singers, the actual conflict between Kalevala and Pohjola appears to have been created by the author to make it interesting for the reader, but more importantly for nation building. Without an enemy, a country cannot be unified. Unity is only possible when faced with an enemy, real or imagined. Okay, let me get one thing out of the way. Many Finnish companies use names from Kalevala for their products. Sampo Bank, Ainu Ice Cream, Lemmenkainen Construction Company, Kalevala Jewelry Company, and many place names. But its influence in the cultural identity of the Finnish state that is more significant. Scholars believed it played an instrumental role in establishing a unified Finnish identity that led to the 1917 independence from Russia. Finland was under the Swedish rule for 600 years. It was annexed by Russia after the Napoleonic Wars of 1808. And around this time, many Finnish intellectuals were craving for a feeling of national identity and independence. Lönnrot was part of a wave that searched for the myths and legends of the Finns. It also helped many Finns to learn their language, as most had learned to speak Swedish better than their native Finnish. The poem used a very rich flavor of the Finnish language that could be as literary as Swedish or Russian. Here, the intellectual elites returned to the poor peasant for the source of national identity. 10 years after the publication of Kalevala, the first high school to teach the Finnish language was established. But more crucially, Kalevala helped Finns get respect and recognition among other Europeans, as they could understand the Finnish history and identity, and even some intellectuals petitioned the Russian Tsar to give Finland independence, much to the dismay of the Finnish church, which opposed nationalism. Today, it's the national epic of Finland as well as Karelia region of Russia. Most of the poems are said to have come from Karelia. There is also a connection with Estonia, its setting of the Kalevala. Finns and Estonians have a lot in common. For example, rivers and lakes are sacred among both peoples. Kalevala doesn't mention the Russians, Swedes, or Germans, which suggests the ancient origins of these tales. Since it's a collection of tales, one doesn't have to read them from start to finish. You can read them separately. I really enjoyed the poem. By reading it, you can feel being in Finland. It's music sang for thousands of years, and now you can enjoy it too. Thank you.